Hello. So, hopefully you can hear me without using my headphones. Just check, there we go. So, welcome to those of you who are just joining. And as always, first of all, wave your hands up in the air, send me some sort of signal if you can't hear me. And also, please, as you're joining at any point, is that waving you can hear me or waving you can't hear me? I'm hoping it means you can. So yes, welcome, welcome. Beautiful to see you joining. And all throughout, there'll probably be times, as I am sort of wont to do, where I'll go off on tangents and talk for a little bit, but I love checking in on the comments. And so even starting with just seeing the topic, if anything's popping up either from your own experience that where you're like yes, or something doesn't make sense, or as I'm talking you have questions or shares, put them in the comments, and I promise, even if I do go on some little winding tangent, I'll check back in. And I love letting this be a dialogue. So please, please, please join in. And with that said, I'm going to dive right in. Ken, thank you. I'm glad you like the topic. So here we go. So first of all, I think I want to set a little context personally on two fronts. And one is that I have found it personally valuable, and I continue to really see people, mainly the clients that I work with and then the people in my sphere, but I continue to see people find value in the distinguishing between the masculine and the feminine qualities that I believe are not only inherent in every human being, but also are at play in the universe. And I remember years ago, this is a little bit of a tangent, and I don't know enough to really keep talking about it, but a colleague of mine named Allison Conte, was talking about that she saw as like a universal dynamic, and she was talking about it in the realm of integral studies, but that polarities themselves, not only are there these other systems at play, but polarity itself is one of the foundations of this realm into which we were born. And I believe there's some real truth to that. So while there are absolutely spiritual traditions and places to access that are sort of beyond polarity, that are more about oneness in either a cosmic sense or oneness in like a unitive sense, I also believe that this realm, like literally the realm that we're born into, is also a realm of polarities. And that our most, I could say maybe the most effective, and also I would say the most fun, like the most fun way to play is to recognize those polarities and then play, like be able to play with them. But if we don't acknowledge that they exist at all, then we can't play with them. Like we don't even know what are the building blocks or what are the rules of the game. So one of the polarities that I personally absolutely experience, and then I really witness with the people that I work with, is this realm of the masculine and the feminine. So I'm going to talk about that realm rather than discussing whether that's a realm or not. That's a different conversation. The other piece is that masculine absolutely does not mean man, And feminine absolutely does not mean woman. These polarities of the feminine and the masculine, as I said, not only do I see, like I experience them personally, do I see them in every person I've ever worked with, literally existing inside every human body, maybe other bodies too, but I'm not going to go there. Certainly within every human body, and then as these more universal frameworks and experiences and energies, if you will, like energies in the world. However, and it's really interesting because often it is the people I see who are sort of arguing against even using the terminology of feminine and masculine that are like mashing feminine to woman and masculine to man. And most people, you know, even who are trying to find some of the real nuance in this conversation, it's challenging to get away from that collapse. So I totally get that. I get that it's challenging to really tease apart the difference between masculine and man and feminine and woman, but I am going to attempt to do that here. So again, I've seen a bunch of you joining as well, and as I'm talking, please feel free to chime into the conversation with, you know, your comments, your questions. You know, agree with me, disagree with me. I'm good with both, but I do love to play. So I really love your comments, and I promise that I will look at them, and you know, try to respond to as many as possible. So let me just check. So that's a piece of the framework that I want to say that to work within. And one of the reasons that I am so passionate about this conversation, actually, and frankly, it's why I teach the way I teach. It's why I created a women's program called Fierce Grace, is that I see so often still, even in this realm, this collapsing of masculine to man and feminine to woman, and somehow really teaching women, like when people do women's work, it's almost entirely feminine practice. And I believe really, really strongly that we all, like all human beings, benefit from feminine practice and from masculine practice, from strengthening our own and also growing these parts of ourselves, like really looking at where are my actions and reactions based out of like a more immature feminine and growing that to a mature and then to what I would call a sacred feminine. And knowing that we all have all of those all the time. Like it's not like we evolve like, I don't have any more immature feminine and I'm only in the sacred. That never happens. So like, let's just cut that out right now too. But the same with the masculine, and really looking at like, what are the, my internal expressions, as well as relational dynamics, as well as like, frankly, systemic and cultural expressions that I would call immature, masculine expressions, and then what are these like healthy and then also sacred masculine expressions, and how do we actually live them through our bodies, like our lived experience. And there I would say, and again, there's fluidity inside of this. I'm never going to be the person who says it's like this for all women or it's like this for all men, but I do also believe that there is something about being born into the world in a woman's body or in a man's body, and whatever that path is. Even if you're born in a woman's body and you transition to having a man's body, or you're in a woman's body but identify as a man, like that is part of what I would call karma and whatever the path we walk. And it actually, I believe, again, it really is valuable to honor those pieces and what they mean. Not because women should all wear skirts and be nice all the time and men should always, wear pants and be the boss, but actually to say like there is something distinct about walking through the world in a woman's body. And my experience will be different than someone who's walking through the world in a man's body, will be different than walking through the world in someone who was born with a penis and then transitioned to have a vagina, or, like all these things. Like, it really is different. And then how we actually display then the masculine energies or characteristics or dynamics, or how we actually embody the feminine characteristics, the feminine archetypes, the feminine energies, that's going to be, it is going to be a little bit different depending on the body we were born into. And of course, also depending on, our family of origin and what we were taught and what culture we grew up. There's all these different dynamics, but I do believe that there are also these threads that run through that are useful to distinguish, because when we consciously distinguish them, we have the capacity to use them consciously. And when we're in the realm of like, we're just all both all the time, then it's a mishmash. And it's more like a tangled ball of yarn. And it's like I've got, purple and black and green and blue yarn all mixed together. And I can't really, I'm trying to, knit stripes on a hat, but I can't actually untangle my yarn to choose the color I want to use in any moment. Whereas when we go like, oh, this is a masculine energy, or this is a feminine energy, and they both live inside my body. But if I've teased them apart, I can go like, oh, I want to draw on this right now, rather than like, I'm just drawing on this massive swirling energy and I don't know which is which or what's called for or what will serve this relationship or this moment or this person. So that's like a lot of words to talk about why I believe this is an important conversation. So the other piece I'll say is that I believe there's a really positive intention for why there is now kind of this repurposing or repackaging of what I would call masculine. And it's happening a little bit the other direction, but it's usually less. And I'll tell you why I think that is in a minute. But why there's kind of this repackaging of what I would consider masculine traits or masculine energies as feminine. And I really do believe that there's kind of this resurging of the rise of the feminine, as it were. And again, you'll see like this mapping over of those two in terms of, I talked about this before, but the whole, the future is female, and then that got turned into the future is feminine, or the future is feminix, and that's a whole other ball of wax. But there's sort of this desire for more of, this is where it gets tricky, because there actually is a calling for literally more women in more areas of life that have been traditionally held by men. And simultaneously, there is a call and a need, I would say, for more feminine in both women and in men in more areas of life and across the spectrum culturally, and in more, in corporations, or people are saying like, not only do we want more women's voices, because that's a particular voice, but we also want more of the expression of the feminine in these areas that have been traditionally both male dominated and masculine dominated. And so again, you can see where it's easy to kind of mish these things together, but they're not the same. And this is part of what we've seen even in like where feminism has had, I would say, amazing benefit. Like if I look at my life is absolutely built on the feminist movement, like first wave feminism. What I have now, the life I get to live, and frankly, the life that anybody who has the capacity to watch this live, male or female, like if your life is built on the people who gave their lives for the feminist movement. And one place that went was like, and I know this is an oversimplification, but an element of that was like, hey, those people over there being men, male-bodied humans, like they have all the power. That's not right, and I agree with that. So women can do whatever, people in women's bodies, in the female bodies, we should be able to be wherever they are. But it didn't always call for more of the feminine in those spaces as well, and including more of the feminine from men. It really was like, let's all be like the people who have the power so that we can equally share the power, rather than like, what does this actually mean to equally, like what if there were other forms of power, or what if you didn't have to look like that or act like that to be in the realm that had. And yeah, I'm kind of using power as like shorthand, right, for access or for money or for decision making or physical freedom and mobility. So it's a complex issue. But I've been seeing this frame. I mean, the one that always stands out to me was a while back actually, but I saw a woman who I adore, but post something about ambition is feminine. And I remember thinking, like, I don't think it is. Like, I'm pretty sure whether you're in a male body or a female body, like, ambition is a masculine energy. But like, is ambition sexy? Can women have ambition and still be sexy? Can women have ambition? Like absolutely. I would absolutely say like ambition is sexy, or, women are allowed to be ambitious, or ambitious women are sexy. Ambitious women can also be feminine. All of those things I would agree with. But it was like this subtle move. Instead of saying it's okay for women to embody masculine traits, instead we were like, well, let's just call them feminine. And that's where I see like the insidious sexism that I believe really, and I don't mean this against men. It's really like a cultural and systemic issue. And it's very pervasive, and it's insidious because because this is how it sneaks in. It sneaks into a woman who would probably call herself a feminist, saying ambition is feminine because that makes it okay for women to be ambitious. Instead of going like, actually, ambition is masculine, and women have ambition, and that's okay, and that's attractive, and that's a good and right expression in the world, whether you're in a male body or a female body. And so it's like this very subtle way of still saying women should always be feminine. And so instead of just saying women are masculine and feminine in all kinds of different dynamics and moments and relationships and circumstances, and able to draw on their masculine or their feminine, and both are right and good and beautiful expressions, that there's still this very subtle hint of women should always be feminine, so we'll just call these things feminine so that it's okay for women to be that way. So I'm going to pause there after my little rant and check in, because I've seen a couple comments go by. And I want to see what you all have to say. Okay. Karen said, when we consciously distinguish them, masculine and feminine, we can consciously use them, quote unquote, love that. Yes, thank you. To me, that is the value of distinguishing them, because this is a little tangent from this particular topic, but I get that question a lot. Like, well, why call them anything at all? Or why, if we all have both of them, then why distinguish them? Or why is that valuable? And again, it's kind of like having different colors. Like, if you don't know that, like, you have blue and you have red, and you're just like, I just painting with both all the time, mostly you're going to end up with a sheet of paper that's all purple. And maybe it's slightly variations on purple, but it's just all purple, rather than having this like dark blue over here and this bright red, and then this part in here that is purple, but it's kind of nuanced, and like actually being able to choose how you want those two colors to relate to each other on a piece of paper. And that's like this really simplistic analogy for, what I see as this kind of magical tapestry we get to create of our lives. So Thank you. I'm glad you like that. Kundan said, what is my take on masculine and feminine and being non-gender binary instead? So this is my take, and I have fairly limited sample size. I love this question, so thanks for asking. I find, and I think it's partly the way that I talk about things, and then partly that I am a cisgendered, heterosexual woman, female, and the realm in which I work is that I find that most of my clients are heterosexual, not all of them, but the vast majority, and the vast majority do identify as man or woman. But I certainly have had some clients who either have some shift in that, or would identify more queer than so distinctly, or a little bit more in the gender binary. Honestly, and because I'm not I don't identify that way, I feel a little hesitant to stake this claim here. But I'll say two things. One is, my take is that it works the same, and that it's really beautiful to distinguish because this isn't gender attached, that these dynamics of masculine and feminine play out just the same in a non-gender binary or non-gender conforming or gender fluid. They actually play out just the same, and maybe there's even more value in the distinguishing because there's so much internal fluidity. So for someone like me, I can just be like, I'm mostly feminine identified, and I'm sort of obviously a woman, and I like to have sex with men. And so there's sort of this obvious place to go. And when there's non-gender binary or conforming or gender queer and more fluid sexual orientation, that there could even be more value in these distinguishing, because it does. And I do see this with some of my friends and clients, is where, maybe they have one lover where they're much more in the masculine role of either leadership or in a penetrative quality. And I don't just mean that physically, but that's the quality. And then in another relational or sexual dynamic, they're much more in the surrendered or the being penetrated or being led or overwhelmed by sensation. And actually the capacity to tease that out means that someone who has more fluidity can actually get their needs met more. And I believe, and this actually, so this is a total tangent, but this comes more from watching my children than I would say my own or other adult sexual preferences. But I watch my children just fluid, my daughter from a fierce, no, and growling at me and stomping or holding a boundary, to, dancing all over in completely organic, there's no music, or she's making up a song, and just to be able to do that. Or my son wearing, dress up armor and a sword, but also a princess dress. And to me, that it's when I say there's tease them apart, I don't mean that they happen separately. I just mean being able to see them as distinct. But I really do believe that children who are growing up today and younger generations are going to be more fluid. They are already, and they are going to continue to be. And therefore this distinguishing actually holds more value, to be able to say yes, you can be that and you can be that. And this is not, because again, I don't have a lived experience of transgender. I don't mean this to say that people's experience of transgender isn't real or won't still be there when this happens. But I also see the capacity to live in a woman's body, a female body, but have strong masculine characteristics, and not necessarily need to choose to have a male body, because in the world that I want to be created in the future, you can live in whatever body you want, and you can also be whatever energy you want, or that you are. So anyway, that's a long-winded answer. I hope that met some of your question. Rita said, a challenge I come across are female leaders who are thought of as role models, put on display from corporations as role models for gender diversity. But when I listen to younger women, they don't see them as role models. They are women in men's shoes. What I see is that women want more femininity in job descriptions. They want to show up with feminine traits. So I do think this is a challenge. I love this comment too, Rita. I think this is both a challenge and it's part of what I was speaking to, in that not only is there this call, which I think is good and right, for more women in traditionally male-dominated areas and also in positions of leadership that are traditionally male-dominated, but there's also a call for the feminine. It gets very subtle and nuanced because, frankly, I do believe that there are certain, like I have a lot of masculine capacity. What I have built as an entrepreneur and as like a teacher, and my capacity to do what I do in the world is truly built on my capacity to dance, like for my own internal feminine and masculine to dance with each other and to meet moments that call for like strong boundaries and clear communication and like sticking to my word, what I said I would do. And then in the next moment, like also to use my feeling body and my intuition to know what is the next thing to do or what's right or where, you know, and how to actually flow both between those two, but also like allow for the flow, which is more feminine. Like there's a more direct path in a masculine energetic. And sometimes that is called for. So it is complex because there are ways in which there are parts of leadership that will call for the masculine, whether it's in a male body or a female body. And I do believe that there are certain roles, whether they're in corporations or they're in, you know, like whatever, that there's I don't know that it's ever going to be like in the job description, you know, that's like, and you're healthy feminine in this way and you're healthy masculine in this way, but that what is being asked within those job descriptions allows for some of the flow, whereas there have been these very rigid forms. And this is where, again, it gets tricky because many women, especially women, many women are rebelling against, they're like, I don't want anything to do with the masculine. I want to live only in my feminine and I just want to lead from my feminine and I should be able to be a CEO in my feminine. And I believe that that is a reaction to what has been a more like controlling or toxic or immature masculine expression culturally, and that most of us have had more experience with the more like, I would call it immature, I would call it more selfish or self-centered masculine. That's like my way or the highway. You know, if you don't like there's a certain rigidity, and that's a more, I mean, people use the word toxic masculinity a lot, and I'm kind of trying to not use it, but it's a violent, it's more toxic, it's immature. It's not the healthiest and certainly not a sacred version of the masculine, but the kind of guidance, the kind of like actual wide awareness that is in the more healthy and the sacred masculine, most people, and certainly women, like they haven't been shown the models of that. And so then there's just a rejection of the masculine altogether. And many women who have taken on strong leadership roles within the current culture have like hardened. And then they hit a point where they're like, I don't want to harden like this anymore. I think I guess I just have to become completely feminine because this is what hardening in the masculine looks like. So again, I would say there's a lot more nuance there. and this is, once again, this is exactly why I created Fierce Grace, and it's why I work with women in this way, is because over and over I find that there's this dualistic thinking, like either I'm in the masculine, which doesn't look good and is more in this kind of controlling or toxic or immature masculine, or I'm in my feminine. Oops, there goes a, and I want that, but then also, you know, many women are afraid of that, because it's like, does that just mean I never, like, what does surrender even mean, right? To be in the feminine, or like, what does that mean? I can't confront somebody or challenge somebody, or like, there's a confusion about what does this mean. And I believe that for both men and women right now, just like humanity on the planet right now, is a call for humans who know how to harness both inside their own body, mind, inside their own being, and express them, especially in the healthier and the more sacred realms. So I hope that speaks a little bit to what you're speaking to. And it's a frustration. I mean, I guess the last thing I'll say is it's a frustration I have of like a lot of women, even of my generation and then younger generations, who are like, I'm not a feminist, you know, I think that really, again, it's a rejection of something rather than a claiming of what's possible. And this is what I believe is what's possible, is to say women do not need to only embody masculine traits in order to have a right to exist in male-dominated realms. Nor do we need to call those energetics feminine in order to make it good and right for women to display them. Nor are we only allowed to be one or the other. Like, there is real fluidity. And a lot of things that I would say are sort of considered traditionally both female and feminine, like parenting, the way that we do it. Parenting, as a general rule, actually takes a lot of masculine, holding the container for wild, young, beastie creatures. But we sort of turn it around, and partly it's because it's being done solo rather than communally. But I'm going to pause because I think I got a little derailed by that, but I hope that addresses, and I'd be curious, like, then your response to what I said as well, Rita. Oh, thank you, Amy. Nice to see you here. Ken said, I think the mindfuck that we are all subjected to is that our physical embodiment necessarily dictates our deeper embodiment. All existence is a fractal. There is an esoteric saying, as above, so below. The idea being that in every level of existence, the forms are duplicated. The essence of life is polarity and a spectrum in between. We all contain polarity, as it is necessary for life to exist. I tend to say yin-yang to reorient the discussion to polarity rather than political or subjective discussion of gender identity. I think that's super valuable. And I've really considered that in my own work, and I've had people suggest that I do that as well. And I think, frankly, I think I actually want to engage in this as somewhat of a political and like of this realm. Like, there's something about the work that I do that's like in the muck of, we were born into this realm, and this is the cultural system we live in right now. And I think I actually, almost because I see so much mapping of man, masculine, feminine, woman, I want to keep using these terms, and I want to keep separating them. Even a student of mine recently, I mean, she's a newer student. She's only been in the embodied relationship salon that John Wineland and I lead for like a month, and I saw her post something that was like, women are this, men are this, when the teaching is actually, this is the feminine expression in all of us, and this is the masculine expression in all of us, and this is how they create polarity and art together, between both internally, which I really like that you said that, Ken, is like We have polarity inside ourselves. I mean, I gave a client, I basically had her do imago dialogue between her internal masculine and her internal feminine because they were at war with each other. And I was like, they can work together, but right now they think one has to win. So we have polarity inside ourselves, but then if we want to create polarity outside ourselves, which we don't all the time, there are times we also want to create resonance, and that's a different set of skills. But when we want to create polarity, which can be in the sexual arena, man, woman, 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 man, man, you know, gender fluid, but when we want to create polarity, there is sort of a taking on of different roles in order to create that polarity. And it's also true, I believe, in terms of like teacher student. And again, that's not even like a power dynamic necessarily, but it is a polarity. And the willingness to hold roles is what allows for the beauty. And it doesn't mean hold the roles like for all eternity, but hold the roles for the moment or the experience in which a certain polarity will create the most beautiful moment. I don't know how else to say it better. So I hope that met some of what you were saying as well, Ken. I love that comment. Flora said, Kendra, smiley face, which makes me happy. I'm trying to talk about your views to a friend, and I would love to have a few examples of feminine and masculine energies. You talked about ambition. Who would be masculine? What are a few other things that you could distinguish? Let's see where I would... So in the broadest, so in a very cosmic sense, I would say the masculine energy in all of us is the consciousness. It's the witness. To bring that down a level of abstraction, there's also the one who holds the space. Now, often, so in like real life example, you know, we would consider, for instance, the person who called the meeting is the one who's holding the space, but they don't always actually do that. Again, this is where it actually becomes valuable to start like teasing these apart, because just because someone said, I want to have this meeting happen and this is what it's going to be about, doesn't mean that once you get into that meeting, they are actually holding that role. Like, I called this meeting, this is the context, this is how long it will go on for, and this is how it will go. That is a masculine capacity, whether it's being held by a man or a woman. And again, actually, the same person could hold this other capacity, which is the capacity to feel what's happening for the different people in a meeting. For instance, like, oh, you know, I can see over there that one hasn't spoken, but they're totally engaged, or that one hasn't spoken, but I can feel that there's actually something withheld, or you know, this one here needs to be seen in a particular way, or like to be able to actually feel what's happening inside the context. So that's a feminine capacity. We also, so John and I sometimes will teach inside of like the holding of the structure is the masculine capacity. And I spoke to that a little bit just now with like a meeting and holding the structure of it. But whatever that structure is, like, but then we would say the feminine inside of that is the energy. So whatever, and again, even the same person, like, again, I'll say, like, as a teacher, it requires, like, to be a good teacher, I believe, requires both. And it requires that they really play together fast, you know? So like for me to hold a room of, you know, 10 people, 50 people, 150 people and go like, no, this is my, like, I say what happens here. And then to bring enough energy to like actually evoke something in people, that's actually me holding both the masculine and the feminine moment to moment to create an experience for those people. You know, I would say, again, this is a very like heteronormative sort of traditional example, but if you had a man and a woman on a date and the man was holding the masculine role, he might even from the outset, you know, like, I'm going to meet you here at 6. And then, you know, she might express her delight that he chose that, you know, like, oh, you know, or be ready at 6 and you need to be wearing walking shoes and layers, right? He's like holding the structure of kind of leading what would she need, but not necessarily telling her what it is, and then showing up, and then he, you know, takes her to the top of a hill and there's a whole picnic set up and blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, her delight or her experience of, you know, the pleasure of like whatever that he had her favorite foods and that he chose the spot where the sun set. That's her imbuing the experience with energy and his capacity to actually hold the structure of it and know everything that would be needed so that she didn't have to hold the structure. Again, for that moment, it could be switched. I mean, I did this for my boyfriend on his birthday, right? So I'm a woman, but I said, I'm going to pick you up at this time. You're going to need a bathing suit and an extra set of clothes. And I took him to like a spa we have in town, and I had scheduled a massage for him. And then after that, I ended up, you know, it was different, but it was like, I didn't tell him I have a massage for you. It was a surprise, but I knew what he was going to need for that experience to be wonderful. And I held it for him, and I let him just like go on the ride. Boundaries in a man or a woman are a masculine capacity. I would say that's a very healthy masculine capacity. The capacity to feel your feelings and express in like trying to think what the word is, but to be able to say like, oh, you know, when you said such and such, like my feelings really got hurt. I didn't like that, or I felt sad. That's a healthy feminine capacity in a man or a woman. So I hope that speaks to some of that. I think I have another video that I can share. Maybe I'll link it in here. That it's long. It might be like 45 minutes, but it really goes into more depth, not only about the masculine and the feminine lines on this, but then also about what would be kind of that more immature masculine, what would be that healthy masculine, what would be that sacred masculine, and the same for the feminine. Stephen, of course, this is, you said women running the patriarchy is still patriarchy, I suppose. Absolutely. Absolutely. I believe that. I'm not even going to go down that tangent because I could probably talk about it for another hour. And then Ken said, I think you make a great point about teasing apart. Observing the distinctions is simply a way of increasing conscious awareness with focus on parts, so that when they are teased together, the synthesis can be tracked and understood much better. Absolutely. Like you said that in way fewer words than I did. But that is exactly why I find so much value here. Karen said, and that is why you are Fierce Grace. Thank you, my love. Megan said it's true, very threatening, feeling, combative, violent. I wonder if you were talking about like some of the things I was saying culturally, because I'm not quite sure when that comment got left. The invitation is open, my love. Amy. Megan said, this is a struggle for me. I feel I easily harden and it hurts. I feel it in my heart and then I feel remorseful. That is a really, I mean, what a like tender share, Megan. I actually was just talking to a woman today, and I wrote it down because I thought this is a good quote. But I said to her, she's going through a very challenging process right now, and she's also working on like her own softening. And at the same time, she's going through a divorce process and she has a child. And I said, you don't need to harden in order to do hard things or to make hard decisions. It's a habit. And it doesn't mean, to me, that doesn't mean that we're not strong or that we're not fierce or that we don't have boundaries or that, it's like, I think also, especially I think of things like bamboo or even, a redwood. There's a flexibility that comes with that. And there's also something very strong. Bamboo, I think, might be the better example because bamboo has so much flexibility, but it's so strong, and it can grow through anything. And there's this, but I think it's really, what I would say, Megan, is I would just encourage you to really keep noticing the moments that you harden. And if you can start to walk those breadcrumbs of like, well, what happened right before that? And it will, it can be a slow process. Sometimes it's fast. You could have an experience like, again, within a workshop or that's facilitated and you can like suddenly see it all in an instance. And then often we still need to sort of breadcrumb our way back, but you can walk back to like, okay, what happened before? And what am I hardening against? Or what do I think if I don't do this, what do I think will happen? And we can, and it's nuanced. This is like a thing. I think it's human again, but I also really see it with women, and I work with women on this a lot. But that it seems like if I don't harden, something's endangered. And there is this way, and then we think like the only other way is way over on the polar opposite of sort of like, then I'm just supposed to trust all the time. And frankly, I think that's actually a way of, for lack of a better word, just like fucking ourselves and proving that we can't really trust, because we go like, I guess I'll just, trust with abandon. More often than not, we find out we needed a little more discernment, and then we've just proved to ourselves that we can't really trust in that way. But it's not one or the other. Like there really is this capacity to, make hard decisions or say hard things, and still some of it is literally physical. It's the throat, it's the jaw, it's this area like around your heart, it's the belly. And it's also our solar plexus, which often we need some help softening. It's very hard to do that on our own. But some of it is literally physical and some of it is energetic, and they work together. So I just really encourage you to keep like playing with that. And even in a moment, you might even be in the moment and feel the hardening. And it's like, what if I softened just 1%? And then find out, like, am I still safe? And what about just 1% more? And you'll start to work your nervous system and your body back into like, oh, I can be here and I can hold a boundary and I can still be softer than I knew I could be. I believe that. Okay, a few more comments and I have to jump off. I'm just really honoring those of you who've stuck with it here. And if I don't get to your comment, I promise that I will, I'll do it in the writing. Ranit said, I love the differentiation of masculine and feminine actions and behaviors that can come from any body we live in. I loved hearing it articulated so clearly. Thank you. I'm really glad that was articulate, because sometimes I can't always tell. I have a strong masculine and a strong feminine and flow between them all the time. Yeah, I've had that sense. I don't think we've ever met, but I've had that sense when we've interacted. It's like, I'm the same. I really have strong both. And then there's just a lot of room to play. Shane said, thoughts on ungendering masculine, feminine traits and characteristics, and instead reaching toward a point of mastery of all skills without recognition as such. And then you said, I just slightly addressed this. And it might've been where I said, maybe there will come a time, I think, when that's true. I don't think we're there yet. And I guess I see other people doing this work in other ways, and maybe their way is better. I don't know. to me, I keep using the terms masculine and feminine because I think we still have such a strong cultural like magnetization there, that in order to actually walk to the next phase that you're pointing to requires that we use the language in order to deconstruct it. And that's just how it occurs for me. But again, there are other, I mean, Ken was talking about this, and I know there's other teachers who teach in other ways, and maybe their way will be better and faster. And I, you know, like mostly I'm like, I just hope we get there. You know, it doesn't matter if it's my way or their way. And I honestly, I think we are. I don't even hope we get there. I know that we're like, I know that's where we're headed. And I believe we can walk every step of the way with this kind of consciousness, and we're on our way. Aw, Shane, thank you for passing on Adam and David's wave. And if you see them again after seeing this, please send them my love. And if you feel comfortable, please give them big, huge hugs. I adore Adam and David. Thank you. And then Ken, you said, I get where you're coming from, talking about what is, and let's keep it real. Thank you. I appreciate that. I hope we get to like actually talk live one of these days. So beautiful to see your faces as I'm scrolling down looking for comments here. And Flora said you'd love the link to that. I will try to find that. I'm gonna write myself a little note to try to post the video for that for you and for everyone. And then this is the last comment that I'm going to look at here from Rita. And then I'm going to sign off. And again, anyone watching the replay, or if you're still here and there are questions or comments, please put them in. And I'd love to keep having this dialogue in the written form. And also, excuse me, I mean, again, this is so nuanced and it's so big. Like, there's no way that I can cover this in an hour-long live. Like, I would never pretend to have all the answers in an hour. So may this be the beginning, you know, whether it's the beginning of an inquiry between us, or it's the beginning of an inquiry in your own mind. And however this continues to evolve, you can always reach out to me on like a personal or direct message if anything feels too tender. And for any of you, I'll post this as well, but for anyone who's interested in learning more about Fierce Grace, I will also post the link for that. And of course, I'm biased, but I think it's an extraordinary program for women that is truly about the dance of all of these energies, like truly all of ourselves, every part of us that is owned and disowned, and bringing them together, and also looking at how do I mature my immature masculine and my immature feminine into the more healthy and the more sacred, so that that's who I get to be in the world and inside my own self. So I'll post a link to that as well. Okay, Rita said, yes, I believe in the balance. It's not about gender, it's about left brain, right brain thinking, masculine, feminine traits. I love how you talk about what is in many corporations or culturally is immature masculine behavior. In my work with women who want more influence in male-dominated industries, they notice that at the moment they are only heard if they speak goals and bottom line, yet they know they will move the corporation forward differently if they bring in vision and intentions into discussion. We need both traits active in corporations. 100% agree, 100%. And some of that, I saw Janine Becker was on here earlier. I don't know if she still is, but I also know that she does work in larger organizations and is starting to bring the weave. And there are absolutely other women doing that as well. Karen Baker was on here earlier. She's working with the NFL, and and in a lot of ways, she was telling me a story about one of her NFL players who was a client, and she was reading him The Giving Tree as part of their coaching. And, these are like, this is happening. And I believe it really does. It just continues to, frankly, those of us who are available to have this kind of conversation, to some extent, I think it's our responsibility. It's our responsibility to talk about this, but even more so to live it, and to be willing to live out on the fringes because it can be scary as a woman. It can be scary as a woman, and it can be scary as a woman, full stop, like end of sentence, but then also to bring in some of the more feminine pieces. But I believe we have that responsibility to all of those who come after us to do whatever we can, whether that's just a little or that's a lot, to continue to bring that forward. So I'm glad you're here, Rita, and thank you for your comments. I'm going to break my rule because I saw that Patrick just commented. He said, I appreciate your description of how the feminine works when working with collectives. You use the metaphor of a meeting or a workshop. I find myself doing the things you described, like feeling into people to know where they're at or where to go next. I hadn't realized I was inhabiting my feminine to do that. So I'll strive to do that more consciously in the future. That's awesome. I love that. I mean, I think one of the things about you, Patrick, frankly, is that you have a relatively well-developed, you have a very well-developed masculine, and you have a relatively well-developed feminine. And again, there does become sometimes more power or more effectiveness when we realize, like, when we can consciously harness those parts. So I look forward to how that plays out with you. Okay, I'm going to come back to this comment, Kip, because that's a big question around resources and suggestions for healing and balancing the masculine and feminine internally. So that's just a much bigger question, but I promise I will come back to it. And again, I want to say thank you to everyone who was here for any part of this live. It's such an honor, and I so appreciate the dialogue. And I so deeply appreciate all of you who are willing to be engaged in this conversation. It's just like, I love it. So thank you very, very much. And I love you. Ciao.